Sir, you can't just sit there. This table's for paying customers, not charity.
The words cut through the cafe's noise, sharp enough to turn heads. A woman in a tailored coat smirked, her gaze flicking from the worn jacket to the small boy clutching his sleeve, as if they were an inconvenience cluttering her afternoon. Chairs scraped. Someone laughed under their breath. The imbalance was clear, public, humiliating. But instead of snapping back, the man simply nodded, thanked the stranger who quietly slid her chair aside, and helped his son sit. No anger, no apology. Just calm acceptance that didn't fit the moment at all. What no one in that cafe understood, yet, was how that single act would unravel everything they assumed. This story isn't about a cafe table. It's about how easily power blinds people. Before you see the exact moment the room goes silent and every whisper dies, you need to understand how cruelty often hides behind confidence. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. He lowered himself into the chair as if the weight of the room didn't matter, movements slow, deliberate. To anyone watching, he looked tired. Maybe worn down by life. The kind of man people step around without noticing. His shoulders stayed relaxed. His eyes stayed clear. The storm around him didn't touch his breathing. The boy beside him swung his legs under the table. Sneakers scuffed, backpack hugged close. He leaned in, whispering something only a child could think was important in that moment. A nod, a faint smile, fingers brushing his hair. That was the center of the man's world, not the looks, not the comments, not the woman still watching them like an irritation she couldn't swat away. The cafe buzzed on. Steam hissed from the espresso machine. Cups clinked. Outside, traffic groaned against wet pavement. Inside, the divide was obvious. Polished shoes and designer bags filled the main floor. Near the edge, where service carts passed and cold air slipped in every time the door opened, he sat with his son, making the most of borrowed space. The woman, Lena Moreau, didn't look away. She was used to being obeyed, used to rooms adjusting to her presence. Her irritation wasn't loud anymore. It was sharper for being contained. A glance at her watch, a tight breath. Control slipping in small, unfamiliar ways. He noticed, of course. Not because he cared, but because noticing was instinct. The hum of the lights overhead felt uneven. A faint flicker near the counter. The register chimed twice when it should have chimed once. Little things. Patterns. He filed them away without thinking. Attention split between the room and the child tracing shapes on the tabletop with his finger. When a barista muttered about the system lagging again, he didn't look up. When a line formed and impatience grew, he didn't shift. He listened. Watched. The cafe felt like a machine under strain, gears, grinding where no one wanted to look. Lena finally exhaled sharply, standing just enough to signal authority without fully committing to it. Her voice carried, not shouting, but practiced projection. Complaints about service, about inefficiency, about how places like this never worked properly. Heads nodded. Agreement followed power like a reflex. He stayed seated. One hand rested on the table. The other steadied his son when a chair bumped into him from behind. The boy flinched, eyes darting up, searching his father's face for cues. What he found there was steady, unshaken. "Hey," he murmured softly, barely audible over the noise. "It's all right." That reassurance mattered more than any insult in the room. The child relaxed, trusting completely, unaware of the undercurrent building around them. Near the counter, the lights flickered again. Longer this time. A murmur rippled through the cafe. Someone joked about breakers. Someone else mentioned storms earlier that morning. Lena frowned, annoyed now for reasons she couldn't immediately dominate. He finally looked up then, eyes scanning the ceiling, the counter, the wall where cables disappeared behind plaster. The awareness sharpened, the calm taking on a different edge. This wasn't concern, it was assessment. A sharp beep cut through the chatter. The register froze. Screens blinked to black, then back, then black again. Groans replaced laughter. Orders stalled. The barista swore under her breath. Lena's irritation tipped into anger. Her phone was already in her hand, fingers tapping contacts, expecting solutions to arrive because she demanded them. They didn't. He rose slightly from his chair, not standing, just shifting his weight. His son looked up, sensing the change before understanding it. Around them, people complained. Money, status, impatience, all useless now against a problem no one wanted to claim. And in that small pause, with the cafe teetering between inconvenience and chaos, the overlooked man in the borrowed chair quietly prepared to step into a space no one had ever imagined he belonged. The moment stretched, thick with frustration and the hiss of cooling machines. People shifted, checking watches, muttering about wasted time. The barista tapped the frozen screen again like it might apologize and start working if pressed hard enough. It didn't. The lights flickered once more, and a nervous laugh rippled through the line. He stayed, half risen, not drawing attention, just listening. The cafe sounded wrong to him now, the hum uneven, the rhythm off. His eyes traced the walls where cables vanished, the breaker panel half hidden behind a chalkboard menu. Years of habit surfaced quietly, the kind that never really leaves you. Lena's voice cut in again, sharper this time. Unbelievable. I've got meetings stacked back to back, and this place can't even keep the lights on. Her phone was at her ear now, heels planted like she could anchor, reality through posture alone. Yes, it's happening right now. No, I don't care why. A man near the door scoffed. Guess we're all stuck, he said, irritation giving way to resignation. The boy tugged gently at his father's sleeve. Are we leaving? He whispered, eyes darting toward the door and back again. Not yet, he replied softly. Let's wait a minute. That minute stretched. The register chirped, died again. Steam sputtered uselessly from the espresso machine. Someone knocked a chair over in frustration. The cafe felt like it was holding its breath. Behind the counter, the barista rubbed her temples. We've had issues since the storm, she said to no one in particular. Maintenance says it's the wiring, but they're backed up for hours. Lena pulled the phone from her ear, glaring. Hours? That's unacceptable. He finally straightened fully, movement subtle but deliberate. Where's your breaker panel? He asked, voice calm, unassuming. The barista blinked. Back there, she said, pointing past the prep area. But we're not supposed to. It's fine, he said gently. I'll just take a look. A few heads turned, not many. To most, he was still the man from the edge table, the one who'd been told where he belonged minutes earlier. Lena noticed, though. Her eyes narrowed, scanning him with renewed irritation. And you are? She asked, tone edged with disbelief. He met her gaze briefly, polite, unreadable. Just someone who's fixed a few things. There was a pause. A beat where someone might have laughed or objected. No one did. The cafe needed a solution more than it needed permission. He stepped behind the counter, moving with practiced ease that didn't quite match his appearance. The barista hesitated, then shifted aside, hope flickering across her face. He crouched by the panel, fingers brushing the metal like greeting an old acquaintance. The boy watched, closely from the table, chin resting on his hands. This was familiar to him, the way his father focused, the world narrowing until only the problem existed. A sharp click echoed as the panel opened. He listened, eyes closed for a second, as if the sounds told a story. "There," he murmured. "That relay's struggling." Lena scoffed. "You can't possibly know that." He didn't look back. "It's overheating. You can hear it." Silence followed. Then, faint but unmistakable, a strained whine beneath the hum. A murmur spread through the cafe. Someone whispered, "He's right." He adjusted a switch, waited, then adjusted another. The lights steadied. Not fully bright, but stable. The machine hummed more evenly. A collective exhale filled the room. The barista let out a breathy laugh. It's working." He stood, brushing dust from his hands. "It'll hold for now," he said. "But you'll want someone to replace that part soon." Applause didn't come. Recognition didn't either, not yet, just relief. That was enough for the moment. Lena's expression shifted, not gratitude, not apology, but something closer to surprise she didn't want to admit. "Well," she said stiffly, "that was lucky." He returned to the table, sitting beside his son like nothing extraordinary had happened. The boy grinned, pride bright in his eyes. "Nice job," he whispered. He smiled back. "Thanks, buddy." The cafe slowly resumed its rhythm. Orders restarted. Conversations picked up. But the air had changed. Eyes lingered longer on him now, curiosity replacing dismissal. If you're still with me, make sure you're subscribed. Because what's unfolding here isn't about a flickering light. It's about what happens when the wrong person gets underestimated. Across the room, Lena watched him over the rim of her cup, annoyance giving way to something unsettled. For the first time since she'd walked in, control didn't feel absolute, and for him, this was just the beginning. Lena didn't look away when he caught her staring. She lifted her cup, took a measured sip, then set it down with deliberate calm, as if reclaiming ground she felt slipping. The cafe had returned to motion, but something subtle had shifted. People glanced at him now, then at her, curiosity threading through the air like a quiet current. He felt it without needing to look. Attention had a weight to it, a pressure between the shoulders. He kept his posture easy, leaning slightly toward his son as the boy traced circles in a thin ring of spilled sugar. Normalcy mattered, especially now. "Dad," the boy murmured, voice barely above the clink of cups. "Are the lights going to break again?" "Not for a bit," he said. "They're behaving." That earned a small nod, satisfied. The child returned to his sugar art, crisis already filed away as something handled. At the counter, the barista moved faster, confidence returning to her. "Hands. Next order," she called, relief bleeding into cheerfulness. The line shuffled forward. Life resumed, but the memory of disruption lingered, leaving people more observant than before. Lena stood. Her chair slid back just enough to make sound. Heads turned instinctively. She walked toward the counter, heels clicking, phone tucked away now that it had failed her. She didn't look at him as she passed, but the space between them tightened, charged. "You should comp that man's drink," someone near the pastry case whispered, not as quietly as they thought. The barista glanced toward his table, then back to Lena, uncertainty flickering. Lena heard it. She stopped, turned halfway, eyes sharp. "Excuse me?" The whisperer flushed and looked away. Power reasserted itself through silence. He watched from the corner of his eye, not intervening. This wasn't his battle to pick. Not yet. His focus stayed on the room, on the faint vibration under the floor that told him the fix was temporary. Stable, but strained. Like someone smiling through pain. "Oh," Lena ordered briskly, efficient again. When she turned, her gaze finally met his. "You know," she said, voice smooth, carrying just far enough, "tampering with private equipment is usually a liability." He met her tone without matching it. "So is ignoring a problem until it gets worse." A few people froze mid-motion. The barista pretended very hard to clean the counter. Lena's smile thinned. "You got lucky." "Luck helps," he said evenly. "Preparation helps more." Her eyes searched his face, looking for something. Arrogance, defensiveness, a crack. She found none. That unsettled her more than anger would have. She turned away without responding, collecting her drink and moving toward the window-side table she'd claimed earlier. As she sat, she kept him in her peripheral vision, pretending interest in her phone while clearly not reading a word. The boy swung his legs again, bumping the table gently. "She's mad," he whispered matter-of-fact. He suppressed a smile. "She's frustrated." Why? He considered that. Because things didn't go the way she expected. Oh. The boy accepted that easily. Adults were complicated, but patterns were simple. Minutes passed. Outside, rain began again, tapping against the glass. Inside, warmth and caffeine dulled the edges of impatience. But beneath it all, the system groaned, unheard by anyone who didn't know how to listen. A low buzz crept back into the lights, barely noticeable. He felt it like a prickle at the base of his neck. The barista noticed too. Her eyes widened slightly. She glanced toward the back, then toward him, hesitation written plainly on her face. Lena noticed that look. She followed it. Irritation flared again, hotter this time, mixed with something else. Unease. She stood abruptly. "Is there another problem now?" The barista hesitated. "It's maybe just a flicker." Lena exhaled sharply. "Unbelievable. This is exactly what I was talking about." He didn't move yet. He waited, listening. The vibration had changed pitch, not failure, strain increasing. "Maintenance isn't coming," the barista said quietly. "They just called back. They're stuck across town." Murmurs spread. Chairs shifted. Someone cursed under their breath. Lena's jaw tightened. She looked around, calculating, then, against her will, her gaze landed on him again. This time, it lingered. He felt the unspoken question, the reluctant need. He didn't rush to answer it. He reached for his son's backpack instead, pulling it closer to his chair, grounding himself in something solid and familiar. The boy looked up at him, sensing the shift again. "Is it bad?" "Not yet," he said, "but it could be if no one handles it right." Across the room, Lena hesitated. For the first time, she looked unsure of which move would preserve her authority. The lights flickered, longer this time. A collective intake of breath followed. He finally stood. The scrape of his chair quiet but decisive, and the cafe seemed to notice all at once. Conversation stalled. The rain tapped harder against the windows, as if leaning in to listen. He didn't rush forward or raise his voice. He simply stepped into the open space between tables, where frustration and expectation had pooled, and felt every eye track the movement. The lights buzzed again, longer, angrier. Somewhere behind the counter, a machine gave a tired whine. The problem was growing teeth now, and everyone could feel it even if they didn't know why. His son twisted around in his chair, watching him with wide, steady eyes. "Dad?" he called softly, not scared, just checking. That single word cut through the tension more effectively than shouting ever could. "I'm right here," he replied, glancing back with a calm nod. "Stay put." The boy nodded, trusting without question, small hands gripping the edge of the table. That trust settled into the father's chest, heavy and familiar, a reminder of what mattered if everything else went sideways. He turned back toward the counter, attention sharpening. Lena crossed her arms, impatience and something like worry flickering across her face before she smoothed it away. "You're enjoying this," she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "The attention." He shook his head once. "I'm watching a system fail," he said evenly. "That's all." A few patrons exchanged looks. Someone near the window muttered that they should just leave. Another complained about losing Wi-Fi. Small problems stacked on top of each other, stress compounding like interest. Behind the counter, the barista swallowed hard. "It's getting worse," she admitted, voice tight. "The breaker's hot, I can smell it." That changed things. The faint tang of overheated plastic reached him too, subtle but unmistakable. His jaw tightened, not in fear, but focus. He stepped closer, palms open, non-threatening. "When did the smell start?" "A minute ago," she said, "maybe 2. Lena scoffed. "So now we're supposed to panic over a smell?" He turned to her then, really looked at her. Not as an obstacle, but as a variable. "Smells mean friction," he said. "Friction becomes fire if ignored." Silence followed, heavier than before. Someone coughed. The lights flickered again, dimming just enough to make people uneasy. The boy slid off his chair suddenly, backpack bumping against the table leg. "Dad, can I hold your phone?" he asked, trying to be helpful in the only way he knew. A soft smile touched his father's face. "Sure," he said, passing it over. "Just don't drop it." That small exchange grounded him, anchored his resolve. He moved behind the counter again, this time with purpose no one questioned. The barista stepped aside without hesitation, relief flashing across her face. Even Lena didn't stop him, though her fingers clenched around her cup. He crouched by the panel, heat radiating through the metal now. Too hot, too fast. His mind mapped the system instinctively, years of experience threading together possibilities. Temporary fixes wouldn't cut it much longer. "We need to shut this down for a minute," he said, not asking. The barista nodded immediately. "Do it," Lena snapped. "You can't just shut down a business in the middle of, if we don't," he interrupted calmly. "You'll be evacuating it." That did it. Fear flickered, brief but real. She hesitated, then waved a sharp hand. "Fine. Do whatever you think you're doing." He worked quickly, movements precise, sweat beating at his temple from the heat. A switch flipped. The lights went out completely. Gasps erupted. Someone cursed. Chairs scraped back. "It's okay," he called out, voice steady in the dark. "Give it a second." In that darkness, his son's voice rang out, small but clear. "He knows what he's doing." A few nervous laughs followed. The tension cracked, just a little. The light surged back on, brighter, steadier. Machines hummed in relief. The smell faded. A stunned quiet filled the cafe. No applause, no cheers. Just the dawning realization that the man they'd dismissed was holding the room together. Lena stared at him, color drained from her face, authority shaken in a way she couldn't immediately repair. The cafe didn't erupt into applause. It didn't need to. The silence said more than noise ever could. People stood frozen in that pause after danger passes, when adrenaline hasn't decided whether to leave yet. He stayed, crouched a moment longer, palm resting against the now cool panel, listening. The system had settled, not perfect, but no longer screaming. He straightened slowly, rolling his shoulders once, then stepped back into the open floor like he belonged there all along. Lena broke first. "So," she said, voice tight, "is that it? Crisis solved?" She tried to sound in control, but it landed brittle. For now, he replied. You bought time, not safety. A few heads turned toward her. The balance shifted again, subtle but unmistakable. The barista exhaled shakily and laughed under her breath, the kind that comes after narrowly avoiding disaster. I thought we were done for, she admitted. He nodded. You were close. The boy hopped back onto his chair, clutching the phone like a trophy. Pride radiated from him, unfiltered. You fixed it, he said loudly, beaming. A woman near the window smiled at him. Someone else murmured, Smart kid. Lena noticed that too. Her eyes narrowed, not at the child, but at the connection she couldn't dismiss so easily. You seem very confident for someone who doesn't work here, she said. He reached for the backpack at his feet, unzipping it part way. Inside, nestled between notebooks and a folded hoodie, was the object he'd guarded earlier. A compact, scarred diagnostic tool, old but meticulously maintained. He hadn't meant to reveal it yet. Circumstances chose for him. I don't, he said, lifting it just enough for her to see. But I know this equipment. The barista's eyes widened. Is that? We haven't had one of those in years. Still works, he replied, if you treat it right. Murmurs rippled outward. Recognition sparked in places it hadn't before. Lena stared at the device like it offended her sense of order. You carry that around? She asked. With a kid, he said mildly. You carry what matters. The sentence landed heavier than he intended. It wasn't a challenge. It was a truth. The boy swung his legs again, oblivious to the undercurrent, humming to himself. Lena scoffed, then stopped. Her gaze flicked from the tool to the panel to the faces around her. She was losing the room, and she knew it. This doesn't change the fact that you interfered, she said. There are rules. There are consequences, he corrected. You saw one forming. Silence again. Outside, rain eased, light filtering through clouds like permission to breathe. Inside, people resumed moving, but slower now, more aware. The barista stepped closer to him. Thank you, she said simply. No performance, just relief. He nodded, tucking the tool back into the bag. The zipper sounded loud in the quiet. Get someone in today, he added. Replace the relay. Don't wait. She nodded quickly. I won't. If this story is pulling you in, make sure you're subscribed, because the smallest details, like what someone carries in their bag, can change everything. Lena straightened, smoothing her coat, reclaiming posture if not authority. You should have said something earlier, she said. I did, he replied, just not loudly. That earned a few stifled laughs, not cruel ones, surprised ones. She flushed. Well, she said stiffly, this establishment clearly needs better oversight. He met her eyes, calm as ever. Oversight starts with listening. She looked away first. The cafe settled into a new rhythm. Orders resumed, but conversations lingered on what had just happened. People glanced at him with curiosity instead of dismissal now. A shift, small but real. He sat back down beside his son, the borrowed chair no longer feeling borrowed. The boy leaned against him, whispering, You scared her a little. He smiled faintly. That wasn't the goal. What was? To keep everyone safe. The boy considered that, then nodded, satisfied. Across the room, Lena watched them, unsettled not by what he'd done, but by how easily he'd done it. The tool, the calm, the way the room had followed him without being asked. For the first time, she wondered who he really was, and why he was sitting at the edge instead of the center. The cafe didn't return to normal. Not really. It pretended to, the way people do after something unsettling passes without fully explaining itself. Cups were filled, orders called out, chairs scraped back into place. But the ease was gone, replaced by an alert stillness that followed him wherever he sat. He felt it like a low hum beneath the floor, not threatening, just awake. Lena remained standing longer than necessary, fingers resting on the back of her chair as if she needed the support. Her gaze drifted to the backpack at his feet again, to the zipper now closed, to the knowledge tucked away inside it. Whatever narrative she'd constructed about him earlier no longer fit. That bothered her more than being wrong. "You should really consider liability," she said at last, voice quieter, less performative. "If something had gone wrong." "But it didn't," he replied, not dismissive, simply factual. "Because someone paid attention." She pressed her lips together. Around them, people pretended not to listen while listening to everything. The barista returned with a cup and set it on his table without being asked. "On the house," she said quickly, cheeks flushed. "Both of you." "Thank you," he said, genuine. The boy's eyes lit up. "Hot chocolate?" She smiled. "Extra marshmallows." That earned a ripple of warmth through the room that had nothing to do with the heaters. Someone nearby chuckled. Someone else nodded approval. Small alliances formed in moments like these. Lena watched the exchange, something tightening in her chest. She wasn't used to being the observer when goodwill moved. It usually followed her. Now it flowed around her instead. She pulled out her phone again, not to call anyone this time, but to search. Names, terms, fragments of memory sparked by the tool she'd seen. Old models, specialized equipment, the kind used by people who solved problems before they became disasters. Her eyes flicked up as he leaned closer to his son, murmuring something that made the boy laugh softly. The sound cut through her concentration. Annoying. Disarming. "You didn't answer my question earlier," she said suddenly. He looked up. "Which one?" "What you do," she said, "when you're not this." He considered that, stirring the coffee he hadn't yet tasted. "These days?" "Yes," she said, impatience slipping back in. "These days." "I take care of my kid," he said. "I fix things when they break." "That's not an answer," she snapped. "It's the only one that matters." A few people nearby went still. Lena felt the room lean just slightly toward him again. She hated that. Hated how easily it happened. She straightened. "You're being deliberately vague." He met her gaze, unblinking. "You're being deliberately loud." A sharp inhale. Someone coughed to cover a laugh. Lena flushed, color rising to her cheeks. She hadn't been spoken to like that in years. Not without consequences. Before she could respond, the lights dimmed again. Not out, not flickering. Just dimmer, like the building was tired. The barista froze. It's not supposed to do that. He was already on his feet, not rushing, not dramatic, just moving when movement was needed. He glanced at the panel, then at the ceiling. "Load's shifting," he said. "They're pulling power somewhere else." Lena's phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen from her assistant. Delays, blackouts, a grid issue spreading across several blocks. She looked up slowly. "You knew," she said. "I suspected," he replied. The room buzzed with unease. People checked their phones. A murmur built, nervous now. This wasn't a cafe problem anymore, it was bigger. He crouched again, checking the panel, then stood. "This place is stable," he said, "for now, but others won't be." Lena swallowed. "What does that mean?" "It means someone planned poorly," he said, "and it's about to show." Her mind raced, pieces clicking together against her will. Infrastructure, systems, failures cascading, the kind of mess money couldn't immediately clean. "Who are you?" she asked, quieter now, stripped of edge. He didn't answer. He reached for his backpack instead, slinging it over one shoulder. He knelt briefly in front of his son. "We're going to step outside," he said. "Stay close, okay?" The boy nodded, serious now. Lena watched them move toward the door, the room parting without anyone realizing they'd made space. She followed a step behind, compelled by something she couldn't name. At the threshold, he paused, glancing back at the barista. "Call it in," he said. "Tell them it's not just here." She nodded, already dialing. Lena stepped up beside him, rain misting the air beyond the glass. "You're not done, are you?" she said. He looked out at the darkening street, lights flickering block by block. "No," he said. "This is just where people start noticing." And for the first time since she'd walked into the cafe, certain of her place in the world, Lena Moreau realized she might be standing next to someone who understood it far better than she ever had. Rain met them as soon as the door opened, cool and fine, misting the street in silver. The cafe's warmth fell away behind them, replaced by the low murmur of a city slipping out of rhythm. Streetlights flickered in uneven intervals, some holding steady, others dimming like exhausted eyes. The boy tightened his grip on the backpack strap, pressing close to his father's side. "Everything okay?" he asked, voice small but steady. "Yeah," he replied. "Just need to stay aware." Lena stepped out last, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft thud. She paused on the sidewalk, heels planted, rain spotting her coat. For a moment, she looked out of place, a sharp silhouette against a street that didn't care who she was. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't answer it this time. Across the street, a grocery store's lights blinked out completely. A collective groan rose from inside before the emergency glow kicked in. Cars slowed, drivers craning their necks, horns chirping in confusion rather than anger. "This is spreading," Lena said, stating the obvious like naming it might give her control back. "Yes," he said, unevenly. She glanced at him. "You talk like you've seen this before." "I have." They stood under the cafe's awning as rain thickened. The boy watched the street with fascination rather than fear, eyes tracking the patterns of light and shadow. He'd grown up learning that problems didn't always mean panic. Sometimes they meant puzzles. A city bus rolled past, interior lights flickering wildly before stabilizing. The driver leaned out the window, shouting something about reroutes. A pedestrian swore when his phone screen went dark. Lena rubbed her arms, not cold so much as unsettled. "My office is 3 blocks from here," she said. "Top floor. Backup generators, private lines. We shouldn't be affected." "Shouldn't," he echoed. She bristled. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means systems fail where people assume they won't," he said. "Complacency's expensive." She scoffed weakly, but the sound lacked conviction. "You're enjoying this," she said again, quieter, almost accusing. He shook his head. "I don't enjoy watching people get blindsided." The boy tugged his sleeve. "Dad, that light's making a funny noise." He followed the small finger pointing toward a street lamp a few yards away. It buzzed loudly, sputtering, halo pulsing erratically. He stepped closer, careful to keep his son behind him. He didn't touch it, just listened. "That one's going," he said. "Transformers under strain." Lena's breath caught. "Is that dangerous?" "Potentially." She took an involuntary step back. Around them, others noticed too now, fear sharpening into urgency. A man shouted into his phone. A couple argued about whether to go home or stay put. The street felt like a held breath. Lena's phone rang again. She answered this time. Yes? A pause, her face drained of color. No, that can't be right. Another pause. We're not even on the same grid sector. She lowered the phone slowly, eyes unfocused. What? He asked. Our building lost power, she said. All of it. Generators didn't kick in. He closed his eyes briefly, processing. That's bad. She laughed once, sharp and hollow. You think? He met her gaze, calm, cutting through her spiraling thoughts. I think someone didn't test redundancy, he said, or ignored warnings. Her mind raced, threads snapping together. Reports she'd skimmed, budgets she'd approved, delays she'd waved off because nothing had gone wrong yet. Until now. This isn't just inconvenience, she whispered. There are servers, data, people working late. He nodded, which is why standing here arguing won't help. She straightened reflexively. Then what will? He looked down at his son. You good walking a bit? The boy nodded, serious again. Where are we going? To higher ground, he said, literally and figuratively. Lena frowned. You're going to my office. I'm going to where the problem is loudest, he corrected. Yours just happens to qualify. She hesitated, pride and fear wrestling visibly. You can't just walk in. He glanced at her badge, clipped neatly inside her coat. You can, he said, and you're not the kind of person who likes being helpless. The truth of that landed harder than any insult. She swallowed. Fine, she said. But if this goes wrong, it won't, he said. Not if we move. They started down the street together, an unlikely trio threading through a city losing its polish. Behind them, the cafe glowed dimly, an island of temporary calm. Ahead, darkness waited, thicker and more complicated. As they walked, people stepped aside without knowing why, making room instinctively. The boy held his father's hand now, grip firm. Lena walked on his other side, heels clicking unevenly on wet pavement. Authority stripped down to urgency. Above them, clouds rolled low and heavy, swallowing the last steady lights. Somewhere deeper in the city, alarms began to sound, distant but multiplying. He didn't look back. Problems like this didn't care who noticed first. They only cared who knew how to listen when everything else went quiet. Rain slicked the pavement as they moved faster now, the city shedding its confidence with every darkened block. Sirens wailed somewhere distant, not close enough to help, just close enough to remind everyone how thin control really was. He walked with purpose, scanning intersections, counting outages, mapping the failure in his head. The pattern was ugly, cascading, the kind that punished shortcuts taken months earlier. Lena struggled to keep pace, coat clutched tight, heels slipping despite her effort. She hated this, being pulled instead of leading, but she didn't slow down. Pride could wait, consequences couldn't. Generators are supposed to isolate failures, she said breathlessly. They're designed to... Designs don't save you, he said. Maintenance does. That stung. It was supposed to. They reached the office tower just as emergency lights flickered on inside, bathing the lobby in harsh white. Security stood uncertain behind the desk, phones out, procedures forgotten. When they saw Lena, relief rushed in. Ms. Moreau, one guard said, we lost everything at once. Access systems, servers. Let us through, she snapped, reflex reclaiming ground. The elevators were dead. He glanced at the stairwell door already ajar, emergency signage glowing. Stairs, he said. They climbed, flight after flight. The boy kept up without complaint, breathing steady, trust unwavering. Halfway up, Lena faltered, hand braced on the rail. 5 minutes, she said. Just give me... We don't have 5, he replied gently, not slowing. She cursed under her breath and followed. When they reached the executive floor, the hum hit him immediately. Wrong, strained, dangerous. Servers lined the glass-walled room like a silent army, emergency power feeding them unevenly. A tech hovered uselessly, pale and sweating. "It spiked," the tech said, then dropped. "We're trying to stabilize." He set the backpack down carefully, unzipping it fully now. The diagnostic tool came out, cables following like veins. Lena watched, heart pounding, as competence filled the room. "You know this system," she said. "I helped design one like it," he replied, plugging in. "A long time ago." Screens flickered, data scrolled. He frowned. "There's your problem." Load prioritization was overridden. The tech blinked. "Only exec approval can—" Lena froze. Memory slammed into her. A budget meeting, a delay, a decision made to keep performance high during peak hours. "I signed off on that," she whispered. He didn't look at her. "Then you're signing off on undoing it." Alarms chirped softly as he rerouted power, isolating failing nodes. Sweat ran down his neck, focus absolute. The boy sat quietly in the corner, watching like he always did, absorbing what calm under pressure looked like. Lights steadied. The hum softened. The system breathed again. The tech laughed shakily. "We're stable." Lena sagged against the desk, relief crashing through her. "You just saved millions," she said. "Data, contracts." "I saved people's work," he corrected. "Money's replaceable." She stared at him, something breaking open. "Who are you?" He finally met her eyes. "Someone you told to move along." Silence filled the room, heavy with truth. If you're feeling this moment, subscribe now, because the biggest reversals always come when power meets accountability. Security and staff gathered, whispers spreading fast. Phones came out. Recognition bloomed. The man at the edge was no longer invisible. Lena straightened slowly. "Everyone," she said, voice steady but changed. "This situation exists because of decisions I made." He fixed it. Not because he had to, but because it mattered. She turned to him. No audience in her eyes now. "I was wrong." He nodded once. "Learn from it." Outside, the city lights began to return, block by block. Inside, something else shifted too. Status, respect, understanding. The victory wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. He packed the tool away, shouldering the backpack again. His son stood, slipping his hand into his father's. "Can we go now?" the boy asked. He smiled. "Yeah, we can." As they left, people stepped aside, not out of obligation, but recognition. Lena watched them go, knowing the world looked different now, and that it was her responsibility to see it clearly. They descended the stairwell in a quieter mood than the climb up, the building humming with restored life behind them. Emergency lights had switched back to their steady glow, no longer urgent, just functional. Staff lingered on the executive floor, voices low, already retelling what had happened, each version sharpening the edges of the truth. He kept his hand light on the rail, body easing out of crisis mode one measured breath at a time. The boy skipped the last step and landed with a grin. "That was like a movie," he said, awe slipping into his voice now that it was safe. "Movies make it louder," he replied. "Real fixes are quieter." Lena followed a step behind, heels abandoned in favor of bare feet against the cool concrete. She didn't care anymore. The building was saved. Her world, at least for the moment, had stopped collapsing. That left room for something more uncomfortable. In the lobby, people turned as they emerged. Security straightened. A cluster of employees went silent. Recognition moved faster than rumor ever could. Someone whispered his name, not given by him, but discovered through frantic searches and half-remembered articles pulled from memory. A former executive, a systems architect, someone who'd walked away years ago. He felt the weight of it settle, familiar and unwelcome. Titles had a way of sticking, even when you tried to leave them behind. Lena heard the whisper too. Her jaw tightened, then relaxed. She stepped forward before anyone else could speak. "He's leaving," she said clearly. "Let him." No one argued. Paths opened without resistance. Not fear this time, respect. They stepped back into the rain-damp air, the city brighter now, lights steady, traffic easing back into impatient normalcy. Sirens faded into distance. The crisis had peaked and passed, leaving behind the echo. At the curb, Lena stopped. "You didn't have to help," she said, not defensively now, just honestly. "I know," he replied. She searched his face, finally seeing past the surface she'd judged so quickly. "Why did you?" He looked down at his son, who was crouched to splash a finger in a shallow puddle. "Because he was watching," he said, "and because systems don't care who you are. They fail the same way every time," she nodded slowly. "I built my career believing money fixed everything." "It fixes speed," he said, "not judgment." The words stung, but they landed clean. She deserved that. "I owe you more than an apology," she said. He shook his head. "You owe your people attention. That's harder." A car pulled up, summoned earlier by reflex. The driver waited, uncertain. Lena didn't move toward it. "What will you do now?" she asked. He adjusted the backpack on his shoulder. "Get him home. Make dinner. Tomorrow, probably fix something else no one's paying attention to." She let out a small, incredulous laugh. "You could run this place better than half the executives upstairs." "I already did," he said quietly. "Once." That landed harder than anything else he'd said. She absorbed it in silence, rain streaking down her hair, no longer bothering to brush it away. The boy stood and tugged his sleeve. "Dad, can we get fries?" He smiled. "Yeah, we can." Lena hesitated, then reached into her coat, pulling out a card. She held it out, not as leverage, but invitation. "If you ever want a seat at a table," she said, "one that listens this time." He didn't take it, not immediately. He looked at it, then at her. "Make sure the table's open to more than just me," he said. She nodded, understanding blooming too late but real. "I will." He finally accepted the card, slipping it into the backpack without ceremony, not a promise, just an option. They walked away together, father and son disappearing into the brightened street, ordinary again by choice rather than dismissal. Behind them, Lena watched until they turned the corner, the space they left behind feeling strangely empty. Inside the building, conversations would continue, stories would spread. People would reevaluate who they overlooked and why. The ripple had started. It didn't need him to stay and watch it grow. He squeezed his son's hand as they crossed the street, city alive around them once more. The world hadn't changed completely, but one corner of it had been forced to see more clearly, and sometimes that was enough. They walked 3 blocks before the noise of the city fully reclaimed them. Traffic pressed in again, impatient horns and crosswalk signals chirping in familiar rhythms. Neon signs flickered with confidence restored, as if the blackout had been nothing more than a bad memory. The streets were eager to forget. He slowed his pace, letting the tension drain from his shoulders, every step easing him further from the systems he'd just held together. The boy skipped ahead, counting cracks in the sidewalk. Crisis already transformed into story material. "Did you see that room?" he said, turning backward as he walked. All those screens? I saw it, he replied. You okay? Yeah, the boy said. I like when you fix things. He smiled at that, soft and brief. Me too. Behind them, footsteps approached. Not hurried, not aggressive, familiar. He didn't turn right away. He already knew who it was. Wait, Lena called, breathless from trying to catch up without her heels. Please. He stopped. The boy halted too, instinctively stepping closer. Streetlight washed over them, flattening shadows, leaving nowhere to hide expressions. Lena stood a few feet away, coat damp, hair clinging to her face, composure stripped down to sincerity. I wasn't finished, she said, not with understanding. He regarded her calmly. Most people aren't. She nodded, accepting that. I keep replaying it, she admitted. The cafe, the way I spoke to you. I didn't even realize I was doing it. That's usually how it works, he said. That doesn't excuse it. No, he agreed, it doesn't. The boy glanced between them, sensing weight without context. Are we in trouble? He asked. Lena startled, then shook her head quickly. No, absolutely not. She crouched slightly to his level. Careful now. Your dad helped a lot of people today. The boy considered that. He always does. Something tightened in Lena's throat. She straightened again, blinking against more than rain. You walked away from everything, she said to him. Power, influence, money, why? He thought about it. About late nights that never ended. About decisions that slowly stopped sounding human. About realizing he'd become someone his son would only see through glass and headlines. Because success costs different people different things, he said. Mine was costing too much. She absorbed that in silence, city noise filling the gaps. I built my life chasing control, she said finally. Today proved how fragile it really is. He nodded. Control's an illusion, responsibility isn't. They stood there, the distance between them no longer hostile, just honest. Cars passed. A bus hissed to a stop. Somewhere, laughter spilled from a bar newly relit. I'm going to make changes, she said, real ones, audits, listening sessions, no shortcuts. That'll upset people, he said. She smiled faintly. Good. A pause settled, not awkward, just complete. The boy tugged his sleeve again. Dad, fries? He laughed quietly. Still fries. Lena hesitated, then reached into her coat again, not for a card this time, but her phone. She typed, quickly, then looked up. I just sent a message, she said. An internal one, about today, about you. He frowned slightly. Be careful. I am, she said. I didn't name you. I described what happened, the kind of help that comes from unexpected places. He studied her, measuring sincerity the way he measured systems. Stories matter, he said. Make sure you tell it right. I will. They turned toward the corner diner, its sign buzzing cheerfully, grease-scented warmth spilling out each time the door opened. Normal life, waiting patiently. Lena lingered on the sidewalk. I won't insult you by asking for more help tonight, she said. But if the city calls... He smiled, a little tired, a little amused. They always do. She watched them go again, but this time without confusion. She understood now why some people chose the margins. From there, you could see everything. Inside the diner, the boy slid into a booth, feet dangling, excitement bubbling. Can I get extra ketchup? Sure, he said, sitting across from him. The vinyl seat squeaked, grounding him fully back in the present. As they waited, he glanced out the window. Lena stood across the street for a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the glow of returning power. He exhaled, long and steady. The world would keep breaking. It always did. But tonight it had been held together long enough for something else to change. The boy grinned at him over the table. Best day ever. He laughed softly, warmth spreading through him at last. Yeah, he said. One of them. Morning arrived gently, as if the city didn't want to startle itself after the night before. Sunlight filtered through the diner window, glinting off chrome and half-empty syrup bottles. He sat back in the booth, coffee cooling in his hands, listening to the familiar sounds of plates and quiet conversation. The boy was busy with fries, perfectly content, unaware that the world beyond ketchup and booths had already begun rearranging itself because of what had happened. Phones buzzed around the diner. News alerts, group chats. Someone at the counter murmured about the blackout, about an executive office saved at the last minute. He didn't look up. He'd learned long ago that attention arrived whether you invited it or not. What mattered was what you did when it came, and whether it stayed longer than it deserved. Across town, Lena stood in a glass conference room that suddenly felt far too exposed. Screens displayed incident reports, timelines, names. Her name appeared more than once. She didn't flinch. She'd already decided not to. Around the table, executives shifted uncomfortably, some defensive, some impressed, some afraid. She spoke clearly, without embellishment, recounting the night exactly as it happened. No heroics, no excuses, just facts, responsibility, and consequences. Back at the diner, the boy wiped his hands on a napkin and leaned forward. "Are we going to the park later?" he asked. "Yeah," he said, "after breakfast." "Good," the boy replied, satisfied. The simplicity of it anchored him more firmly than any title ever had. Outside, a delivery truck rattled past, normal life asserting itself, one routine at a time. Lena ended the meeting with directives instead of platitudes. Audits, reviews, mandatory redundancy testing. More importantly, listening sessions that included people usually filtered out by hierarchy. The room resisted at first, then bent. Power, she realized, didn't disappear when shared. It redistributed, often more effectively. When the meeting ended, no one clapped. They didn't need to. The work ahead was louder than approval. He paid the diner bill in cash, leaving a modest tip. The waitress smiled, unaware of the quiet significance of the man she'd just served. They stepped outside together, sunlight warming the pavement. He breathed deeply, feeling the last of the tension slip away. For the first time since the cafe, he felt fully present, not scanning for failures, not anticipating collapse. At her office window, Lena watched the city move. Traffic flowed, lights stayed on, systems held for now. She thought about the cafe table, about the ease with which she'd dismissed someone who didn't fit her expectations. The memory stung, but it also clarified something she'd been missing for years. Respect wasn't granted by position. It was earned through attention. They reached the park just as children spilled across the playground, laughter cutting through the air. The boy ran ahead, joining a game without hesitation. He took a seat on a bench, watching, the backpack resting beside him. It looked ordinary again, just fabric and zippers, its significance hidden unless you knew where to look. Lena drafted a second message later that afternoon, this one public. It spoke about unseen labor, about humility, about the dangers of overlooking, quiet competence. It didn't mention a name or a cafe. It didn't need to. The response was immediate, messy, human. Some praised her, some criticized her. She accepted both. Growth rarely arrived without friction. On the bench, he smiled as the boy waved, triumphant over a small victory. A woman nearby nodded politely, then hesitated, recognition flickering before she looked away, choosing discretion over curiosity. He appreciated that. Being seen didn't have to mean being followed. As evening approached, the city settled into itself again, wiser in small, uneven ways. Systems would fail again. People would misjudge again. That was inevitable. But somewhere between a cafe table and a darkened office tower, a line had shifted. Not dramatically, not permanently, just enough to matter. He stood when the boy called for him, brushing dust from his jeans. Together, they walked home, ordinary silhouettes against a functioning world, carrying with them the quiet knowledge that dignity, once reclaimed, didn't need an audience to endure. Evening settled in gently, the kind that felt earned rather than imposed. Streetlights hummed to life one by one as he and the boy walked the last stretch home, grocery bag swinging lightly from his hand. The city felt calmer tonight, not because it had learned its lesson completely, but because someone had interrupted its worst instincts long enough for reflection to sneak in. Windows glowed with dinner light. Radios murmured. Life continued, stubborn and ordinary. At home, shoes were kicked aside. Jackets hung where they landed. The boy dropped his backpack near the door and headed straight for the sink, washing his hands with exaggerated seriousness. "I'm starving," he announced, as if the world might not know. "I figured," he said, smiling. They cooked together, simple food, familiar rhythm. The boy stirred when told, tasted when allowed, asked questions that drifted from Transformers to playground politics without warning. He answered what mattered, let the rest pass. Not every moment needed a lesson, some just needed presence. Later, as dishes dried on the rack, the boy curled up on the couch, eyelids heavy. "You're my hero," he said suddenly, words tumbling out without ceremony. He paused, heart catching just enough to matter. "I'm just your dad." "That's better," the boy replied, already half asleep. He covered him with a blanket and sat for a moment longer, listening to the steady breathing, the quiet proof of why everything else faded into background noise. Titles never tucked a child in. Money never noticed the small things. Responsibility did. Across the city, Lena stood alone in her apartment, shoes finally off, jacket draped over a chair she rarely used. The day had been long, louder in aftermath than in crisis. Messages still waited unanswered. Tomorrow promised resistance, questions, uncomfortable meetings. She welcomed them. Power felt different now, less like a shield, more like a tool that demanded care. She poured a glass of water and stared out at the skyline, light steady, systems holding. Somewhere down there, a man she'd dismissed was making dinner, reading a bedtime story, fixing something no one else noticed yet. The thought humbled her. It also grounded her. Change wouldn't come all at once. It never did. It arrived in increments, in choices made when no one was watching, in how tables were shared and voices heard. She resolved to remember the cafe, not as embarrassment but as a marker. The moment she learned that leadership began with attention. Back in the quiet apartment, he turned off the lights and sat by the window, letting the day replay without sharp edges. He didn't regret stepping in. He never had. He regretted only the times he hadn't, when fear or exhaustion convinced him it wasn't his place. Tonight proved otherwise. Place wasn't assigned. It was claimed by those willing to act. Outside, the city, the wing tomorrow. Eamon nodded and turned slightly toward Marina. "We'll talk about it, after the terminal's secured." A hint of relief flickered through her expression. Not triumph, relief. The crisis was ending, but something new had begun. Leora stepped forward and slipped her hand into her father's. Can we go home soon? Soon, Eamon said, squeezing her hand gently. Just one more check. Marina watched them, father and daughter, and her breath caught again, but this time not from weakness. This time from clarity. Leora smiled at her shyly. I'm glad you're okay. Marina knelt slowly, ignoring the medic's warning glance. Thanks to your dad, she said softly. He's extraordinary. Leora nodded proudly. I know. The simple confidence in her voice tightened something in Marina's chest. As Eamon guided his daughter toward the exits, Marina called after him. Not loudly, but with unmistakable intent. Eamon. He looked back. Today wasn't just about survival, she said. It was about seeing what really matters. For a moment, the noise of the terminal faded again. He gave a small, steady nod, then walked forward with Leora, leaving behind a director who no longer saw him as invisible. A director who would never forget the man who saved her life when she pushed him away. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?